the invention of coinage was the birth of money and the gold standard its adolescence, then the digital age has brought money into an entirely new adulthood, one shaped not by touch but by code. Let's rewind to the late 20th century. Paper cash still ruled. People stood in line at banks. Checks were mailed. Transactions took days. But the seeds of something radical had already been planted. In 1950, the Diners Club issued the first credit card. At the time, it was a novelty, a way for businessmen to pay for lunch without cash. But that small plastic card would soon evolve into a tool that redefined how we think of money, not as something we hold, but something we access. By the 1980s and 1990s, ATMs were everywhere. Banks went online. The internet began weaving itself into the fabric of finance. With it came the rise of electronic money, money that didn't exist in your pocket but on servers. It lived in databases, spreadsheets, and networks. You couldn't feel it, but you could move it. Instantly, this digitalization brought two major shifts. First, speed. No more waiting days for a check to clear. No more carrying cash. With a click of a button, you could pay a friend, buy a book, send rent, invest in a company, all from a screen. Second, scale. Digital money made the global economy more interconnected than ever. You could work with someone in Singapore, hire a freelancer in Nigeria, and buy a product from Brazil, all without leaving your home. This wasn't just convenience. It was transformation. But even as we embraced this new speed, we began to see its shadows. Credit cards, once liberating, also enabled debt. Easy access to money often meant overspending. The lines between savings and loans, between assets and risks, became blurred. By the 2000s, financial systems had become incredibly efficient and incredibly fragile. Then came 2008, a global financial crisis sparked by reckless lending in the U.S. housing market, spread like wildfire. Banks failed. Markets crashed. Millions lost their jobs and homes. Trust, the very foundation of money, was shaken. And in that moment of doubt, something unexpected happened. A 9-page document appeared on the internet, written by someone under the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto. It described a new kind of money, one not controlled by banks, one not printed by governments, one built on blockchain technology, a decentralized public ledger that no one could alter or censor. And just like that, Bitcoin was born. At first, people dismissed it. Internet money, they scoffed. But for others, especially those disillusioned by centralized banking, Bitcoin wasn't just a currency. It was a revolution. Cryptocurrencies flipped the script. No need for banks. No need for borders. No single point of failure. Just math, code, and consensus. Over time, Bitcoin inspired thousands of other digital currencies. Ethereum, Solana, Dogecoin, and more. Each with its own community, purpose, and vision of value. And here's where the story of money took another twist. Because digital currencies weren't just a new form of cash. They questioned everything. What is value? Who should create money? What gives a currency legitimacy? Governments took notice. Regulators scrambled to respond. Some banned crypto. Others embraced it. In 2021, El Salvador became the first country to adopt Bitcoin as legal tender. Central banks, not wanting to be left behind, began developing their own CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. These are digital versions of national currencies, designed to combine crypto's speed with government backing. So now We're in the middle of a new kind of monetary evolution, one where physical cash is disappearing. Digital wallets like PayPal, Venmo, Alipay, and Momo dominate everyday transactions. Entire economies are running on QR codes, contactless payments, and biometric ID. Money has never been more abstract and more powerful. But in this new age, we face new questions. What happens when a small coding error can wipe out millions? When a tweet can cause a currency to crash? When hackers can drain wallets in seconds? Money, once solid and simple, is now as fluid and complex as the networks that carry it. Yet, amidst all this change, the old rule still holds. Trust is everything. Bitcoin only works if people believe it has value. Your credit card only swipes if the bank approves. A central bank only sustains its economy if citizens trust it to be responsible. So here's our third lesson. No matter how much technology evolves, money remains a human story, written in confidence, edited by behavior, and powered by belief. As we look to the future, with AI predicting markets, NFTs monetizing art, and digital currencies reshaping nations, we're reminded that money isn't done evolving. It's just getting started. What began as a cowrie shell in someone's hand is now a blockchain entry verified across the globe. And in this shift from physical to digital, from trust in kings to trust in code, we see the true power of money, not as a thing to own, but as a force to organize us, not just as a tool to trade, but as a language to express value, and above all, not as an invention of greed, but as a reflection of us, flawed, brilliant, and always evolving. Money and GDP, the pulse of modern economies. Today, when economists want to know how a country is doing, whether it's thriving or struggling, they don't start by looking at gold reserves or the amount of cash in circulation. They look at one number, GDP, or gross domestic product. But what does GDP really measure, and how does it tie back to money? To answer that, we have to connect all the threads we've followed so far. In its simplest form, GDP is the total monetary value of all goods and services produced within a country over a specific time period. If a farmer grows rice, a teacher gives lessons, or a software engineer builds an app, GDP captures that activity. It's like a giant receipt of everything an economy creates. But why express this in money? Because money is the universal measure of value. It lets us compare the worth of very different things. A sack of potatoes, a surgery, a movie ticket, a computer on a single scale. That's the beauty of money. It translates effort, creativity, resources, and labor into a common language. And that's why GDP matters so much. It doesn't just tell us how much a country is producing. It tells us how much value it's generating. And money is the yardstick we use to measure that value. Let's pause here and reflect. Money isn't just the oil in the machine. It's part of the machine. It flows through businesses, households, and governments. It funds projects, pays wages, repays loans, and buys services. When GDP grows, it usually means more money is circulating. When it shrinks, money dries up. But this relationship isn't one way. While GDP is measured in money, it also affects money. Here's how. When an economy grows and its GDP rises, people generally feel wealthier. Incomes rise. Businesses expand. Governments collect more taxes. That gives the state more power to invest in infrastructure, education, healthcare, or technology, each of which can further boost productivity. And when productivity increases, GDP increases again. This is the virtuous cycle. But when GDP falls during a recession, war, or financial crisis, confidence drops. Consumers spend less. Businesses cut jobs. Tax revenues fall. Governments borrow more. Currencies may lose value. Inflation may rise or fall, depending on the situation. And just like that, the cycle reverses. This is why central banks and policymakers watch GDP so closely. It's not just a number, it's the heartbeat of the economy. To understand the full picture, though, we need to explore how money creation itself affects GDP. Modern economies run on what's called a fractional reserve banking system. In this model, when banks receive deposits, they don't just sit on that money. They lend most of it out, keeping only a small fraction in reserve. This process multiplies money. If you deposit $1,000 and the reserve requirement is 10%, the bank can lend out $900. That $900 can be spent and deposited again, and so on. This is how credit expands the money supply. And what does more money mean? More spending, more investment, and often more GDP growth. But there's a delicate balance. If too much money is created too quickly, especially without matching increases in production, inflation can spike. Prices rise. Purchasing power drops. That's why monetary policy is so crucial. Monetary policy refers to how central banks manage money supply and interest rates. If growth is too slow, they may lower interest rates to encourage borrowing and spending. If inflation is too high, they may raise rates to cool the economy. These decisions ripple through GDP numbers. And here's where we return to the incredible vision of those who designed these systems. People like John Maynard Keynes, as mentioned earlier, understood that economies aren't machines, they're ecosystems. Emotions matter. Confidence matters. If people believe the economy will grow, they invest. If they're scared, they save. Money, again, proves to be not just a thing, but a story people believe together. Consider this. During the COVID-19 pandemic, GDPs around the world collapsed. Businesses shut down. Travel stopped. Spending froze. But central banks responded aggressively. They lowered interest rates. Governments issued stimulus checks, printing trillions in new money. The goal? Keep money flowing. Protect demand. Stabilize GDP. And it worked to a point. GDPs recovered faster than in previous crises. But new challenges emerged. Inflation surged, and central banks had to shift strategies quickly. The lesson? Money and GDP are tightly linked, but not always in predictable ways. Let's now zoom in on how digital money is influencing GDP today. With cash becoming less central, more economic activity is being captured digitally through mobile payments, e-commerce, and online platforms. This improves data accuracy, allowing policymakers to respond faster. It also increases transaction efficiency, lowering the cost of doing business. Imagine a farmer in rural Vietnam who used to sell produce in cash at a local market. Now, with mobile banking and digital payments, they can reach urban buyers directly. They're contributing to GDP in a more visible, scalable way. Multiply this by millions and the digital transformation becomes a GDP accelerator. Cryptocurrencies, while still volatile and not fully integrated into formal GDP calculations, are also playing a role. They allow capital to move across borders without traditional gatekeepers. In countries with hyperinflation or weak banking infrastructure, crypto can provide a lifeline, a stable form of money that isn't controlled by failing institutions. Even more futuristic is the rise of programmable money through central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. With CBDCs, a government could send money directly to citizens during crisis, instantly and without intermediaries. This could make fiscal policy faster and more precise, improving GDP responsiveness. Still, these innovations come with risks. Surveillance. If every transaction is tracked, what happens to financial privacy? Cybersecurity. What if a CBDC system is hacked? Dependence on infrastructure. What if the internet goes down? The point is, as money becomes more digital and integrated into GDP systems, the need for resilient, ethical design grows. Finally, let's talk about the distribution of GDP, because averages can be misleading. A country might have a high GDP, but if the wealth is concentrated among the few, most people won't feel prosperous. That's why economists now talk about GDP per capita, income inequality, and inclusive growth. Money isn't just about how much there is, it's about who has it and what they can do with it. A brilliant central banker, a gifted finance minister, or a forward-thinking entrepreneur can help steer GDP in the right direction. These are the people who build trust, who balance innovation and stability, who understand that creating money is not the same as creating value, but when done wisely, it can enable value to flourish. So, let's appreciate the architects behind these systems, the ones who understand both the art and the science of money. They don't just print currency. They engineer confidence. They design opportunity. They connect money to meaning. GDP at its heart is a reflection of our choices, how we work, what we build, and what we believe is valuable. Money makes that reflection visible, and that's the final great insight in this part of our journey. Money and GDP together form the pulse of a modern economy. One shows us what we have. The other shows us what we do with it. The future of money and human imagination. If money began as a story we all agreed to believe, then its future depends on the stories we're willing to tell next. From shells and silver to bytes and blockchains, money has always evolved alongside human imagination. And now, in the 21st century, we're on the edge of its most radical transformation yet, not just in how it looks or how it moves, but in what it means. Let's begin with a simple truth. Money is becoming invisible. You might have noticed this in your own life. How often do you use physical cash anymore? In many parts of the world, Scandinavia, China, urban US, physical currency is disappearing. Mobile payments, QR codes, contactless cards, and crypto wallets are taking its place. And that shift isn't just about convenience. It's about access, speed, and scale. When money becomes data, it can move faster than ever before. A small business in Nairobi can receive payment from New York in seconds. A teenager in Jakarta can earn income from a game server in Seoul. Barriers like distance, language, even banking infrastructure start to fade. Money becomes global, fluid, and programmable. But programmable money? What does that even mean? Imagine a digital dollar or euro that can be coded with rules. Money that knows it can only be spent on food, or that expires after 30 days, or that automatically splits between a landlord, a savings account, and a retirement fund. With central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, this kind of monetary logic becomes possible. It's as if the money itself carries intentions. Governments are already experimenting. China's digital yuan is being tested in major cities. The European Central Bank is exploring a digital euro. In the US, the Federal Reserve is studying frameworks. These are not cryptocurrencies, they're state-backed digital cash. But they use similar infrastructure. Secure, traceable, fast. This new wave of currency could reshape everything from welfare to taxation. Emergency relief funds could be sent directly to citizens' wallets during crises. Fraud could be reduced. Taxes could be collected automatically with each transaction. But as always, there's a flip side. Who controls programmable money? Who sees the data? What happens to privacy? When money becomes code, the question isn't just how it flows, it's how it's governed. Do we trust a central bank to see every transaction? Or should we decentralize power? That's where cryptocurrencies enter the stage, not just as financial instruments, but as philosophical statements. Bitcoin, born in the ashes of the 2008 financial crisis, was more than just a new kind of money. It was a challenge. It said, what if we didn't need banks? What if money wasn't issued by governments, but by mathematics? What if trust could be built into the code itself? For many, this idea was radical, and for some, it was liberating. Over the last decade, thousands of digital currencies have emerged. Ethereum added smart contracts. Stablecoins offered price stability. DeFi, decentralized finance, reimagined lending, borrowing, and investing with no central intermediaries. Today, billions of dollars flow through blockchain networks daily. But the road hasn't been smooth. Volatility, scams, regulation gaps, and energy use have raised real concerns. Bitcoin's energy consumption alone has drawn criticism, and governments are pushing back, some banning crypto, others embracing it. Still, the bigger picture is this: we are experimenting at planetary scale with the very definition of money. And that brings us back to belief. If people believe Bitcoin has value, it does. If people trust a CBDC, it works. If a community builds its own local currency and trades with it, that too is money. The flexibility of money is astonishing and deeply human. But beyond technology, there's a deeper transformation unfolding, a shift in what we value. Think about this. The economy has long measured tangible goods: cars, homes, oil, steel. But more and more, the world's richest companies trade not in goods, but in attention, data, and time. What is the value of a YouTube video watched by 1 billion people? What is the GDP impact of a viral tweet? How do we measure the work of an AI model or the value of a digital identity in the metaverse? We're moving from an industrial economy to an intangible economy, and our systems of money and GDP must adapt. Some thinkers propose new metrics: gross domestic well-being. Others suggest universal basic income, supported by high productivity automation. Still others look to carbon credits and social impact bonds, monetizing the protection of nature or the improvement of lives. In all these innovations, money is still the medium, but the message is evolving. And so we arrive at a paradox. Never before has money been so advanced, fast, smart, borderless. And yet, never before has it been so philosophically fragile. Who should control it? What should it measure? How should it serve humanity? The answers lie not in algorithms alone, but in ethics, vision, and trust. This is where we must honor the people who shape these systems, the economists who rethink incentives, the engineers who secure networks, the entrepreneurs who test new models, and especially the architects of money itself, those rare individuals who understand that money is not just an economic tool, but a social technology. These people are not just good with numbers. They are good with people, with psychology, with foresight. The creator of a monetary system is not merely an administrator, but a designer of possibility. They have to imagine what kind of world the money enables, what kind of behavior it rewards, what kind of future it builds. In this sense, creating money is one of the most profound responsibilities a person can hold. To shape money is to shape civilization. And now, more than ever, we need such visionaries. because the challenges ahead are complex. Climate change, inequality, digital displacement, political polarization. Money alone can't solve these, but it can be part of the solution if designed wisely. In the future, we may see multiple coexisting currencies, some national, some local, some digital, some natural. Digital identity wallets, blending payments, reputation, and access. Tokenized economies, where even art, loyalty, and education are traded on blockchain. AI-powered financial advisors for every individual, democratizing investment and planning. Values-aligned economies, where money flows based on ethics, not just efficiency. But for any of this to work, the core truth must hold. Money must be trusted, understood, and human-centered. So as we look forward, let's not just ask, what will money look like? Let's ask, what will money mean? Will it still be a symbol of power, or will it become a tool for empowerment? Will it be controlled by the few, or shaped by the many? Will it widen inequality, or fund fairness? The answers aren't in some distant future. They're being written now in policy rooms, in code bases, in classrooms, in protests, in startups, in everyday choices. Because money is not just what we spend. It's what we believe. And what we believe is the most valuable currency of all.